Have you ever noticed how you get closest to a breakthrough and then suddenly pull away? What if the thing holding you back isn't failure, but the fear of becoming someone new? So, welcome back to Women on the Brink. Today, I want to explore another idea that I recently came across on social media. And the phrase was called threshold addiction. I don't know if you've heard of it, and I don't even know if it's an official psychological term, but I thought it was kind of worth looking into because I immediately knew what it was pointing toward. You know, those moments in life when you get incredibly close to something you've been looking for. You know, maybe it's a breakthrough or a dream or a new identity, a deeper understanding of yourself. You know, you spend months or even years moving toward it. And then just as you reach the edge of something transformative, you pull back. Maybe you procrastinate or you get distracted. You find a new project and you convince yourself that you're no longer interested or you just get busy with something else, right? It's almost as if there's this invisible line. And the closer we get to crossing it, the stronger the urge becomes to retreat from it. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized this is not just a theory. I mean, I've lived it myself. So years ago, I joined a psychic development group because I was genuinely curious. I wasn't trying to prove anything and wasn't trying to become a psychic. I simply wanted to explore experiences that weren't fitting neatly into my existing understanding of reality. And at first, it was really, really fascinating. You know, the more I participated, the more interesting things became. And I was having experiences that really challenged my assumptions about the world. Some of them were difficult to explain, some of them were kind of exciting, and some were deeply meaningful. But some, if I'm honest, were a little unsettling. And not so much because they were negative, but because they raised questions about consciousness, about intuition, questions about what we know and what we don't know, questions about whether reality might be larger than the framework that I had been used to understanding. And at the time, I thought my biggest challenge would be skepticism from other people. But looking back, I don't think that was the challenge at all. I think I reached the threshold of my comfort zone. And it's one thing to be curious about mystery, and it's another thing to stand close enough to it that it begins to sort of challenge your identity. Because if your worldview starts changing, then you're changing. And that's where things become uncomfortable. And I don't think I consciously, just decided to walk away. I don't remember saying to myself, "Oh, God, this is too much." Instead, I found a perfectly respectable distraction: university. Now, I want to be clear. I'm really grateful for my education. University has really, really enriched my life in so many ways. It's taught me how to think critically, how to evaluate evidence, and how to engage with really complex ideas. But when I look back, I sometimes wonder whether part of me was also seeking something more safe, like a structured environment with lectures and textbooks and research papers and measurable outcomes. University is a place where uncertainty can be organized into categories and theories. And what's interesting is how polarized these worlds are often presented, aren't they? Like on the one side, university provides science. And on the other hand, I mean, psychic development is often considered more spiritual. One side's very skeptic, the other is mystery, one's rational, one's unexplained. And reality rarely fits into really nice, neat, tidy categories, does it? In fact, listen to this. I recently discovered that at the University of British Columbia, there's a course being offered called Witches, Vampires, and Zombies: Anthropology of the Supernatural. Damn, that title alone is worth taking the course, right? Unfortunately, it hasn't fit into my schedule, but I have a feeling down the road I'm going to be eventually taking that course and making that happen. And you know what I love about the course is that it doesn't set out to prove or disprove supernatural experiences. Instead, it examines how different cultures experience the occult and the supernatural and the unexplained. In other words, it asks a completely different question. It's not asking, is this real? But what does this mean? And I think that's a fascinating shift, to be honest, because regardless of where we stand on these topics, humans have always been drawn towards mystery. Every culture has stories, ritual, every cultural has experience that challenge ordinary explanations. And maybe the most interesting question isn't whether every claim can be verified. Maybe the most interesting question is why these experiences continue to emerge across cultures, across centuries, and across human history. Anyway, this episode is really not about psychic development. It's all about thresholds because I think we all encounter them, right? The athlete has a threshold just before reaching the next level of performance. Entrepreneurs reach a threshold before launching a business. Artists have it before they share their work. Even parents, before their children step into a new phase of life. And I don't think thresholds are necessarily about success. They're more about transformation because crossing a threshold means leaving behind an old version of ourselves. And that can feel surprisingly threatened because the familiar may not be perfect, but it's familiar. We know who we are there. We know how to navigate it. And the unknown, even when it's really exciting, it usually requires a surrender. And it asks us to release certainty and ambiguity and asks us to become someone new. And maybe that's why so many people get stuck just before the breakthrough. Not because they lack talent or intelligence or they lack opportunity. Maybe the next step just requires a different identity. And maybe that's hard for us, right? I think that's okay though, because I don't think that the thresholds necessarily disappear. I think that they might just be put on hold and wait for us until we are ready, right? And what strikes me now is that life keeps presenting us with these moments. Maybe it's a conversation we know we need to have with someone. Maybe it's a dream we need to pursue. Maybe it's a truth we need to acknowledge or even a mystery we need to explore. And every time we approach one of these thresholds, we face the same choice: retreat into what's familiar or step forward into what is possible. So maybe the real question again is not whether threshold addiction is real. Maybe it's what threshold am I standing in front of now? What could I be avoiding? And what part of myself is waiting on the other side of the threshold? Because the greatest opportunities for growth rarely appear as certainty. I've sure found that out. They usually feel a little uncomfortable and full of curiosity or sometimes even fear. And maybe the challenge isn't to, just ignore those feelings. Maybe we just need to walk into it anyway. So thanks for listening today. And until the next time, pay attention to the places where you feel both drawn and afraid. Those places may be closer to your next chapter than you realize.